Hey, you're watching the second video in my animation tutorial series for Doom modders. In the previous episode, we went over how to use Slade in order to pull resources from Doom files. This allowed us to get the art, music, and programming code as needed. In this episode, I'm going to talk about how to use Photoshop to edit these files. This is not an in-depth Photoshop tutorial. I'm going to save that for a future series. Photoshop is also not the only program you can use. Paint.net and GNU's image manipulation program, or GIMP, are two free options you can use to edit sprites. But because I mostly know Photoshop, that's what I'm going to cover in this video. Before we begin, let's just take a quick look at our files. You'll notice that I put all the files from the previous episode in Fist version 2. I like to make sure that each little project that I work on gets its own directory. The project I'm going to work on for this video is the Project Brutality pistol version 2 because I'm going to change what was in the game before. So in this directory, I've got a development folder, and inside of that, a frame pieces folder. I'll talk more about my organizational structure in the future, but this is a good way to start. In this directory, I've got a file I've already done a lot of the work on, but I've still got a few things left to do. So I'll open it up, and this is Photoshop. Your interface probably doesn't look like this, especially if you've just cracked open Photoshop for the first time. Photoshop uses what are called workspaces, and that's essentially a layout for all of the elements that you have to work with on your screen. If you need to switch between them, you can click on Window, Workspace, and you can pick the ones that Photoshop automatically gives you. Right now, I'm using a version of the Essentials workspace. If you want to go back to how it was, you can click on Reset Essentials. So I like to have the Layers and History panel on the left side of the screen. This is just my personal workflow. Don't take this as any sort of rigid, you must do this instruction. To get rid of a tab, simply right-click on it and say Close. To move a tab, simply click it and then drag it where you'd like it to go. As you move it, you'll see blue lines appear. That blue line tells you where it's going to end up. When you let go, it'll appear there. You can also click on a panel and drag it into another tab series. You'll notice that when I click this here, that little area there becomes blue. When I release, it simply adds the tab. There's also some icons here. This icon is for history. If I click on it, it pulls it out. I like to keep the history tab underneath layers. So in order to put it underneath, I'm going to need to go to the bottom of the layers tab. My blue line appears, and when I release, it's there. Now this is obviously too small, so I'll click on the little center between and drag this up. That's fine. I also don't need these tabs, so I'll go here. You can actually click Close Tab Group, and that will get rid of all of them. And there you have it. So as you can see, I've got a whole lot of layers and folders here. A layer is exactly what it sounds like. You can think of it almost like a sheet of transparent plastic onto which you have drawn color, in this case pixels. If you put more than one on top of each other and make them visible by clicking on this eye icon here, then you can see that they simply stack on top of one another. I like to keep my layers organized. To do that, I simply use a lot of these folders here. You'll notice that I have one folder for dual wielding, and here I can go down to reloading, and here I can go down to silenced, and here I can find the layer that I was working on. You'll notice that these eye icons need to be clicked for every single folder as I go down in the chain. This eye icon only talks about the visibility of the layers in this folder here, so if I turn this off, it's not going to affect anything. But if I turn off this eye icon, this affects the reload folder, and so it's going to turn everything beneath it off. You'll notice that these eye icons remain checked, but they're dim, indicating that they can't be seen because a parent folder has been turned off. To make a new layer, I simply click on New Layer. And you can double click on it to change this. Test Layer. And you can paint on it. Whee! And you can turn it off. And because that is junk, you can then delete it by clicking on this trash can icon. It'll ask you if you're sure. Click Yes. If you want to make a new folder, there's something to know. If you click on a particular folder, clicking the New Folder icon will put that folder next to the one you've clicked on. So now you can come in here and click on this Test Folder. You can click on New Layers. It'll put the new layer inside of that folder. Test Layer 2. And again, you can paint In this case, I'm going to pick a terrible teal and make some squiggles. All right, good job. Anyways, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this folder. You have to come up with your own organizational system here. I have my own, but obviously whatever you're working on is going to dictate what kind of structure you use. The last thing I'll talk about before I move on is the history panel. The history panel has all the actions that you've taken. Every time you do something with a pencil tool, creating a new layer, moving a layer around, anything like that, that becomes another line in your history. By clicking on it, you can go back to any point in that history and make a new change. Once you make a new change, it's going to forget everything that came after the old change, and now you can't access them anymore. So the two tools that I'm going to talk about today are the pencil tool and the eraser tool. First, the pencil tool. The pencil tool will put down sharp-edged areas of color. The first thing you must do before you actually put any color down, however, is to make sure that you have a layer selected. If I mouse over the art area here, you'll notice that I have a no symbol instead of a mouse pointer. That's because I have no layer selected. Simply come over to your layers panel and click on the layer you want to edit. Photoshop is very picky about this. Make sure you have the right layer selected or you might end up putting pixels somewhere you don't mean to. So clicking and dragging shows this. The only thing to really notice here is that the edge here is very sharp. That means there's no transparent pixels on the border of this shape. If you want to look closely, you can actually move around very quickly by holding Alt and rolling mouse wheel up. That allows you to zoom in. If you want to pan the artboard, you can hold the spacebar and then click and drag. In that way, you can navigate on your image very quickly. One of the most common pencil tools I use is the 1 pixel wide pencil tool. If you want to change the size of your pencil head, simply click on this little drop down here and change the size to whatever pixel amount you want. In this case, I'll change it to 1, meaning I get this. Okay, but I really don't want either of those. This is simply showing you how to use it. Here's a situation where I'm actually going to use this. One of the things that I need to do is to refine the edges of this silencer here. You can see that there are some transparent pixels because that checkered background is showing through some of the color here. In order to do this, I would like to draw a pixel here. But I don't want to use teal because that's ugly. Instead, I would like to actually use the color that's there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that color. While the pencil tool is active, you can hold Alt and click on that color, and it will set the color that you picked to be your active color. You can then click and notice that that pixel is now solid. I will do this for some of the darker pixels. Now the reason I did it for only the darker pixels is because I'm going to erase the lighter pixels. The way I'm going to do that is with the eraser tool. I'll go over to here and click on eraser. You'll notice my brush size is too large, so let's fix that. And one other thing to note. You want to go to mode pencil when using eraser tool, generally speaking. The brush tool I'll talk about in another video. For right now, just understand that the brush tool gives you a soft edge with transparent pixels, which is not what we want. So I'll come down here and simply click on the area you wish to erase, and boom, it's done. Now you'll notice that that didn't erase it completely. Let me zoom in. You can see that it's still there. What's going on? Well, the problem is that my opacity has not been set to the highest level. Right now it's about 40%. That means that I'm only going to erase about 40% of that pixel's color. So, if I want to get rid of all of it, I'll simply slide this up to 100%. No problems. Add in some color here, and I'm happy with that. You can see that there are some transparent pixels on the side of the barrel here, and I can go clean those up, but really, I'm just going to be doing that same process. Now the last thing that I want to do is I want to actually save this file so that I can use it. The first thing I'll do is I'll save it as a PSD file. The PSD file is essentially the file format Photoshop uses in order to keep all this information about the layers and other bits in that file. That way when you open it up, you can simply start editing these pieces right here. On the other hand, this is not a file format Doom knows how to use, so you need to export it to a PNG file. So I'll say File, Save As, and I'll click on Save As Type, PNG, and I'll give this a new name. I'll click Save, and you'll notice here it says Large File Size, Fastest Saving. That's the one we want. Click OK, and you're done. The reason we save it as a PNG file is not only can Doom use that, but also it preserves the transparent pixels. This checkerboard pattern here means there's no pixel data, which is exactly the behavior we want. We can see now that we have this right here, when I double click on it, and there's no content in the background here. This is good because when we go to display this on the screen, we don't want to cover up anything else other than the area needed for the gun and the hand. And that wraps up this tutorial. Next time we're going to talk about some basic animation techniques in Adobe After Effects. Thanks for watching.